In Hollywood, there have always been actors who seemed almost ready to become great. Their faces lit up the posters, their fees approached the $20 million mark, and even the studios were already preparing contracts with sequels. But then something went wrong. One bad movie, one failure that became a stain on his career, and the actor turned into a second-tier star. At best, an eternal supporting actor, at worst, a hero of strange C-grade movies. However, today's story is not about an actor who was broken by failure. Today it is about an exception, about a man who refused to become a big Hollywood machine, about someone who, at the peak of his popularity, simply did not want to play by the rules. It's about Tom Hardy, and if you think you know this actor, you'd better watch it to the end. You will see the story not only of a movie, but of a choice that most people would hardly make. And before you forget, subscribe to the channel. There will be many more stories about those who broke the system, or allowed it to break them. Tom Hardy started out with dreams, and these dreams often broke his heart. In 2005, he auditioned for the movie Pride and Prejudice. He was even told that everyone loved it, but it's a woman's movie, based on a woman's book, and no woman can imagine Mr. Darcy with Tom Hardy's face. After these words, Hardy almost physically felt the doors to one movie closing and opening to another. In the next pavilion, a movie about British hoodlums was being shot. That's where Tom went, and that's where it all started. His film debut was modest but notable, the series Band of Brothers, where he had a small but memorable role. Then came Ridley Scott's Black Hawk Down. In these films, Hardy hardly spoke, but he was memorable. His helmet, his eyes, his presence, everything looked cinematic, and Hollywood saw his potential. In 2002 to 2003, Tom starred in several projects at once. He had high hopes for the film Star Trek: Retribution. He prepared for this role for weeks. He watched everything he could, and he went on screen hoping that now everything would change. Changes came, but not the ones he was waiting for. The film flopped. It was criticized by literally everyone. Even Patrick Stewart, with whom Hardy had many scenes, said it was the worst film in the series. And the film simply broke Hardy himself. He started using everything he could find. Alcohol, drugs, everything. His career went downhill. Supporting roles, films with a rating of 2.8 on IMDb. The fall was painful and endless. Back in the 90s, Hardy wanted to be a rapper. He even recorded tracks about life and concepts on a tape recorder. But all that is in the past now. In the mid-2000s, he began applying for every possible casting call. And that's how he ended up in the BBC film Life Backwards. Ironically, it was in the role of an alcoholic and drug addict that he was able to stand out for the first time. Hardy lost weight and didn't sleep enough to look the part. He went through the usual auditions, like everyone else. No connections, no calls from producers. But after that film, doors began to open. He landed roles in Oliver Twist and Wuthering Heights. But most importantly, there was the film Bronson. Jason Statham was supposed to play the lead role in the film, but due to scheduling conflicts, he left the project. Hardy gained 15 kilograms of muscle and worked almost for free. But the result was impressive. Critics were enthusiastic. Hardy began to get noticed. And then, silence again. The film was shown at festivals, but it didn't make it to the box office. Hardy seemed to be on the brink again. However, one director did notice Bronson, and it was none other than Christopher Nolan. When Christopher Nolan invited Tom Hardy to appear in Inception, it seemed like a second attempt to break out of his perpetual status as a near star. Hardy's role was not a leading one, but in a film like this, that didn't matter. Every minute on screen was golden, and Hardy took advantage of every one of them. The film was a hit. It received a 9 on IMDb, was wildly loved by critics and audiences, and most importantly, the name Hardy appeared in studio notebooks with a plus sign. It was after the beginning that he made it onto the list of those who were called first, not last. He was no longer the guy who was chosen to replace the busy Statham. But despite this, Hardy himself did not strive for super success. After the beginning, Tom received an avalanche of offers. He was offered leading roles, big checks, franchises. But it was during this period that he began to systematically turn them down. He said no to the remake of Total Recall. And he did well. That movie with Colin Farrell flopped. He also said no to Suicide Squad, where he was supposed to play Rick Flag. He declined because of the protracted filming of Legend, where he played both leading roles, and in which he gave himself 100%. Many believe that it was then that he began to deliberately distance himself from the Star Factory. In the film industry, it's simple: star in a couple of blockbusters, and you're in the loop. Hardy didn't want to be in the loop. His refusal to appear in Terminator, Genesis, Tarzan, and even the Everest Project with Doug Liman all point to one thing: he deliberately slowed down when everyone else was running a marathon. But he did accept one offer from Nolan: the role of the villain Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. It was, without exaggeration, a world-class blockbuster. Tom Hardy transformed himself again. He gained even more muscle, wore platform shoes because he is 175 meters tall, and had to look more massive than Bale. And again, in a role where he had to say very little, Hardy gave his all. However, there was one nuance: Bane's accent. Hardy was inspired by old British travelers and tried to add charisma to the character, but the result was strange. Half of the English-speaking audience simply could not understand what he was saying. There was criticism, but it was mostly technical. The film itself grossed over $1 billion. Hardy officially entered the big leagues. And, as is often the case with actors, he immediately turned in a different direction. After The Dark Knight, Hardy agreed to star in a film that seemed destined to be the biggest flop of his career: Mad Max. Fury Road was a project that took more than 3 years to shoot, with a budget that kept growing. Changing locations, problems with Mel Gibson, conflicts with the cast, everything pointed to a fiasco. Hardy had regular conflicts with director George Miller. He didn't understand the instructions. Talking was forbidden. His character is mostly silent. So the actor started mumbling, which became his trademark in the film. Charlize Theron was openly annoyed. The atmosphere on set was tense. The film took a long time to edit. The studio didn't believe in it. But the result impressed everyone. Mad Max: Fury Road became a new classic. Audiences were thrilled, critics were thrilled, and Hardy gained international recognition. He even apologized to Miller and Theron, admitting that he had behaved like an inexperienced guy who didn't understand the scale of the film. At that point, sometime in 2015, Tom Hardy could have become Hollywood's highest-paid actor. He was recognizable, critics adored him, and his fees were skyrocketing. But he hit the brakes again. He agreed to a small role in Dunkirk, simply because it was Nolan. Then, another role in an arthouse film. Then, the series Taboo, which he produced himself. And it was only in 2018 that he made the choice to return to mainstream cinema, solely because his children asked him to star in Venom. After 3 strong years, Fury Road, Legend, Dunkirk, Hardy had every right to take a break. And that's exactly what he did. He had offers, he had contracts, but he ignored most of them. In Hollywood, such actors are called unpredictable. However, in 2018, he agreed to a film that no one expected: Venom. And if you think it was because of the big paycheck, no, it was simpler than that. His children asked him to. Hawkeye has said more than once that his sons asked him to star in a movie they could see in theaters. It was important for him to leave something he could share with them. And although the initial reaction to the Venom trailer was, to put it mildly, mixed, Hawkeye himself took the project seriously. He voiced the symbiote, dividing the image of Eddie Brock and Venom into 2 different personalities. All the dialogues between the hero and his alien inner voice are his. And it was this choice that made the film a kind of comedy thriller that didn't quite fit into the usual Marvel/DC formats. The film was torn to pieces by critics. The plot was weak. The action was formulaic. The characters' logic was questionable. But the audience didn't care. They believed in the tandem of Hardy and the symbiote. The film grossed $856 million, becoming one of the most successful solo debuts for a character in cinema history. Sony didn't believe it was possible, but the audience had their say. And now Hardy had another film that worked not because of the critics, but because of his charisma. In the second part, Hardy didn't just play Eddie Brock again. He became one of the screenwriters. It wasn't widely discussed, but it was Hardy who set the tone for the film. More comedy, more internal conflict between the hero and the symbiote, more absurdity. Venom 2 was released in 2021, when box office revenues were still feeling the effects of COVID-19. But even so, the film grossed over $500 million. It was a tremendous result, and that's when Hardy decided, enough. After the second Venom movie, the actor said that the third film would be his last in the franchise. Not because of insults, not because of money, but because enough is enough. Hardy has said more than once that it is important for him to leave behind not just movies, but something personal. Of course, there are no final decisions in Hollywood. If the third part, which has already begun screening, earns enough, Sony will try to bring Hardy back. But he is no longer the kind of person who chases after paychecks. Therefore, a return is only possible under very special circumstances. As he himself jokes, unless I need a moped. After Venom, Hardy almost disappeared from the radar. He stopped acting regularly. He could only be seen in 2 films, Capone, 2019, and The Rider, 2021. Both films flopped at the box office, but Hardy didn't care. He didn't do promotional tours, give interviews, or try to explain the film. He was preoccupied with something else, martial arts. So, after Big Hollywood, Tom Hardy began appearing at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitions. Without fanfare, often under a pseudonym. And he won, not as a star, but as an athlete. He was asked more than once why he was wasting his time on this. He replied simply, because it's real. Here, you can't hide behind editing. Here, you either win or you lie on the mat. For Hardy, this path was a logical continuation, not as an actor, but as a human being. In the 2010s, he signed a contract with Discovery and traveled 1,000 kilometers across wintertime Yakutia. He said it was one of the most emotional experiences of his life. There were no cameras, no scripts. There was only cold, snow, and complete isolation. This is another reason why he lost interest in cinema. When you spend several days in the midst of real nature, when you are literally freezing, the question, what's the next role, seems ridiculous. In 2017, at the height of his fame after Fury Road, Dunkirk, and the first Venom, Hardy suddenly did something unexpected. He returned to television. And not just as an actor, but as a producer, concept creator, and lead performer. Taboo is a dark, atmospheric, uncomfortable series. It's the perfect platform for Hardy, who has never fit into any mold. The first season was complex, harsh, and profound. Viewers who were expecting another thriller or adventure story got a complex drama about dirt, politics, power, and inner demons. And all this in Hardy's signature style. The series was well received, and it would have been logical to expect a second season in a year or 2. However, more than 7 years have passed, and Taboo has not returned. Why? There is no official reason. But behind the scenes, industry insiders talk about the high budget, difficult ratings, and Tom Hardy's busy schedule. That's a good question. Since 2017, Hardy has only appeared in a few projects. Apart from Venom and 2 small films, his schedule is almost empty. And it's not because no one wants him. There are offers. Hardy is still considered one of the most unique actors of our time. He is capable of changing the genre, rhythm, and atmosphere with his mere presence. But he just doesn't want to. Hardy doesn't chase awards, doesn't participate in Oscar campaigns, doesn't knock on directors' doors. He decides for himself when to take the stage. And he very rarely agrees. Over the past 10 years, Tom Hardy has declined or been unable to appear in more than a dozen major films. Dag Lyman's Everest. The film was shut down because another film beat it to the punch. Black Mass with Johnny Depp. Hardy was supposed to play the main character's brother, but was unable to due to filming commitments. Suicide Squad. He declined due to scheduling conflicts. The Legend of Tarzan. He didn't even want to discuss it. Terminator. Genesis. Negotiations were underway, but in the end, Hardy withdrew from the project. That's tens of millions of dollars. Those are potential franchises. But Hardy seems to have never worked for money. Hardy's latest project, which had not yet been released at the time of writing, was Havoc by director Gareth Evans, creator of the cult action film The Raid. The project was filmed back in 2021. But after that, silence. According to official explanations, there were not enough days to reshoot with the entire cast. But even the director himself admits that everything was delayed. Netflix is silent. And although there is no trailer yet, fans' expectations are huge, because this may be Hardy's last film for a long time. I have things to do in life. This is a direct quote from Tom Hardy. It explains everything. He was born into a wealthy family and was not forced to chase roles his entire life to pay the bills. But he could have, because he had the talent. However, with age, he has become increasingly clear that he doesn't need to be a star to live a full life. He acts when he wants to. Otherwise, he trains, travels, does charity work, spends time with his children, competes in jiu-jitsu competitions, and simply lives. Tom Hardy's story is not about failure or downfall. It is a story of choice. He could have been the next Bond. He could have been in all the Marvel movies. He could have earned hundreds of millions of dollars. And he did none of those things. Not because he couldn't, but because he didn't want to. He went through addictions, ups and downs, earned an Oscar nomination, created a cult image, and became the face of a franchise. And yet he remained a man who could calmly say, "I'm done." Will he return to the big screen? Maybe, if there's a good script, or a request from his children, or just a new moped that needs to be paid for. But even if he doesn't return, he has already left his mark, not as a superstar, but as an actor who is always interesting to watch, and as a person who is able to leave the game on his own terms. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you found it interesting, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, and share the video.